about seasonal fruits. And they say, let there be people eat seasonal fruits. Let them have fruit juice. Why should you use these fruits to make alcohol? Why should the best quality of wheat of Punjab be diverted, which should be distributed under PDS? PDS wheat is diverted to make beer, and they said we would not allow. So we have seen some very brave and pro people decisions taken by elected representatives. So leadership and democratic participation very important. Wherever there is a muscle power, where there is a terrorization, humiliation, degradation of women, even elected representatives not being allowed, like we have heard in certain places where panchayat office is locked, and the man in the village, the bullies in the village, they keep the key, and they don't allow these women to enter Panchayat Bhavan, or they would not even allow them to sit on the chair, or they would, if there is Dalit woman, there have been attacks. Those cases have also happened. So, but largely what we have seen that they have been quite in last 30 years, like 94 we got this 33% reservation, and now in 2021 we have seen massive change that has come up in leadership. And it was these women who got elected. They are the ones who are responsible for starting gender responsive budgeting. Because in the first year, like immediately after the constitutional 73rd and 74th amendment, when these elected representatives attended the first meeting, whether it was in urban local self-government body, that means municipal corporation and municipal council, or in the rural local self-government bodies like Gram Panchayat and Jilla Panchayat, people were laughing at them. They said, who are you? You are just a puppet in the hand. आप तो कठपुतली हैं. आपके पति की जैसे चाबी चढ़ाएंगे आप काम करेंगे. आपको क्या आता है? आप तो सिर्फ 7th पास है, या तो आपको तो बजट बनाना भी नहीं आता. Do you know what is proposal? Do you know what is expenditure? Do you know what is revenue? फिर तगड़ी सी बजट बुक दिखा के बताएंगे इसमें से क्या आपको समझेगा. And these two things they would not be allowed. One is a vehicle of the local self-government bodies, and like in city like Mumbai is the wealthiest municipal corporation in Asia. So all the women corporators were not allowed to touch two things. बोले हमारी वैन को, so municipal vehicles you can't touch. Whatever work you want to do in your ward or in your constituency, either you walk or you use public transport. And second one, they would not allow them to touch was budget. They said, you just don't know. It is at that time that corporators, women corporators of India, of Mumbai city, they approach organization called Yuva, Youth for Unity and Action. And the director of Yuva, Minar Pimple, and you must have been knowing his name, he was in charge of the Millennium Development Goal for India in the United Nations. He approached me, this Vibhuti, you are teaching economics, can you explain budget to our women corporators? And that's how the whole exercise, and it is these women elected representatives who demanded that they should, government should start, state should start the city building programs or about the governance. There are certain states in which they also form their organization. Like in Maharashtra, we have a Mahila Rajasatta Andolan. That means it is a network organization of all women elected representatives. Whichever political party you are in, whether you are in ruling party or opposition party, you are concerned about the gender responsive budgeting, and you are together. And when it comes to the patriarchal onslaught or male domination against them, all these women get united, and they, because the weapon which is used against women elected representatives or even sarpanch is a no confidence motion. And this no confidence motion would be used. They say they don't know anything, they are illiterate, they are semi-literate, they are not tuned to do such a complex thing as a governance. And that was the weapon being used. And women would get, that's how they formed this network organization. The fourth very important issue, and that is there in almost all developmental issues, is a gender-based violence and access to justice. The moment you challenge the status quo, women demanding right to land, women demanding property right, women asking for job in a MG Narega. Currently, we see that there is such a high male unemployment due to lockdown, due to uh, COVID pandemic related unemployment, where there's a very high unemployment. And when women stand in the MG Narega queue, immediately everyone says, why are you competing with men? When there are so many men unemployed, why you have to stand in the queue? You just sit at home. But there are women who have a dire need. They are women-headed households. If they are a widow, if they are single, if they are deserted, if they are divorced, if they have no one else, or a husband is very ill, or a man in the family, they have migrated for a long time and they are also caught under lockdown. They need money, no? So it is, but they face violence, and also violence in the community, domestic violence. If you go by the NFHS National Family Health Survey, nearly 45 to 48% of women in our country are facing domestic violence. So many times they are even deserted, they are thrown out of house. So we need a budget for their rehabilitation. The fifth very important and it can be even starting point, the poverty reduction. The most important thing, anybody who is a victim of poverty, currently official state statistics, government data says that 25% of Indian population is below poverty line. Health and well-being are also very important, both not only physical health, malnutrition, morbidity issues are there, and also well-being, mental health, stress-free life. These are there. And the everywhere, like the gender equality around the world is very important, because all the countries that now we have a gender empowerment measure and gender development index, where the 191 countries who are the members of United Nations, UNDP provides the comparative analysis of all the gender development index and gender empowerment measure. Now, what do we mean by gender budgeting? As Professor Afroz said, we are not asking for a separate budget. Gender budgeting doesn't mean a budget for women. It is a dissection of government budget to establish its gender differential impact, to translate, and on what way. Like you have when we had Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Right to Education Act, and the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, in the initial years, what happened? Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was quite effective, even in the areas where people were completely honest. They were right from politicians, bureaucrats, villages, all of them, very boys in the village were in school. But there, the and child labor among boys stopped. But it also, the role of boy child labor was taken over by his sister. So girl children, the child labor among girl children increased, because parents said, what is use of educating a girl? Investing in a girl is like a watering neighbor's plant. बेटी पे ध्यान देना मतलब कि पड़ोसी के पौधों को पानी देना, because in any case this daughter is going to go away to her in-laws place, हमको क्या फायदा? That is the mentality still large number of Indian population, large percentage of Indian population has. So that the evaluation of the impact analysis of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was done. It was found that the patriarchal bias was working against girls' education. And then there was a change in the designing of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, in which it was made mandatory that minimum 30% of beneficiary of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan budget should be girls. In any school, if they say that we don't have any girl in the school, then you have to ask, what is wrong? What are the factors which are preventing girls to attend the school? Is it a transport? Then okay, we will see to it that transport is arranged. If it is looking after younger siblings, because both the parents are working and they have entrusted the job to this elder sister to look after younger siblings, then we can design the schools in a different way, that convert one room in the school into a crash. The girl will come with a younger sibling. Don't make her bring textbook, give her locker. All these girls should be given locker in the school, and let them sit in a school for 1 hour more to finish their homework. No homework for them. Let them complete homework, keep their bag in a locker, and go back with the younger sibling. And in all 2-3 recesses, small recess, big recess, they can go and check in a crash which is there in school only, and and employ women from the locality only as a helper of this crash and crash teacher. So solution is there. There are so many areas where you have nomadic people, and the Rajasthan, the lowest literacy area was among the people who are in caravan, who are constantly nomadic shepherds and all. And then how did Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan reach there? They said that they started a program called IAS officer started a program called Dusra Dashak. That means those the children who drop out in a 10 to 20 age group because they are moving with the caravan, and they said, okay, we can employ a teacher who is ready to move with the caravan. Okay, any educated person from this community who is ready to move with the caravan. In Maharashtra, we have a area called Khandesh, where Khandeshi workers, they are in Maharashtra for 4 months during monsoon. For 8 months, they all move, whole family moves to Gujarat to work in a sugarcane mm, factories, sugar factories. So they started Sakhar Shala. Sakhar is a sugar school. That means it is for sugar workers, and the teacher is ready to go. He is teaching in Maharashtra for 4 months and another 8 months. So if there is a will, there is a way. So for that, it is very important to find out that how do we, whatever commitments we have made, gender commitments or empowerment of women, gender equality, how to translate them into budgetary commitments, and what kind of flexibility, what kind of rules we will have in this in the expenditure pattern. So gender budgeting is concerned with use of public economics to reduce gender gaps in vital areas in the lives of women and girls, and now even the transgender community, because the two states have already started doing gender budgeting for Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Kerala has also completed census of transgender persons, whether they would be classified with women and girls or with men and boys. So education, health, food security, safety, employment, and skills. Another thing is that reprioritization in public spending. For example, in 1991, when the new economic policy was adopted, the first X fell on PDS. That under the ration system, we will not give. Like there are states like Maharashtra, they said sugar will not be distributed under PDS, and that sugar was diverted for making variety of alcoholic beverages. And it was women in the Panchayat institution, and they are the ones who were up in arm against the state, and they said, what are you doing? Why are you not let our children have sugar? Why you want everyone to become alcoholic? So then the reprioritization happened, that okay, you just can't divert all grapes of Maharashtra just to make wine, or you can't divert all oranges of the state for making of narangi, what is that called, beer, no, a very strong alcohol. So reprioritization is also possible. Transparency and accountability for revenue generation. You can't generate revenue by casino economy. That's what the women from Goa said. When the Goa's chief minister, Mr. Parikar, when he invited all the foreign direct investment to create a casinos in Goa so that it can attract foreign tourists, the women's groups like Bailan Chosar, they said nothing doing. If you want to generate revenue, let us generate through agriculture, let us generate through genuine industry, real economy. We don't want this kind of criminal activity to be happening in our state. And also, how do you use the public expenditure? If you are making any wasteful public expenditure, that can also be prevented by the conscious bureaucrat or elected representative, or by the community pressure. Lift the veil of statistical invisibility of unpaid care economy. Currently, we are all of us under Corona pandemic are talking about unpaid care economy. How valuable unpaid care economy. Even when the lockdown was there, the economy, like all the sectors of the economy were closed down. None of us died. Why? Because of the unpaid care economy. Everyone was cooking, everyone was cleaning, everyone was looking after their loved ones, everyone was nursing. So care economy is very important. And NIPFP, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy Making, in its very opening remark only, they acknowledge that we know that when women enter the labor market, they are already exhausted because they have done cooking, cleaning, carrying, collection of fuel, fodder, water, kitchen gardening, and animal care in the rural economy, subsistence economy. Another important rationale for gender responsive budgeting is the equality dimension and also efficiency dimension. They said it is not only a question of charity to do gender responsible, it is the fundamental necessity of the economy. 50% of the workforce and their talent, if it is not used for the nation building, then country is also losing. It's inefficient. You have invested in them, you have invested in their education, you have invested in their like citizenry, but you are not utilizing it for nation building. Transform the macro policy to ensure gender justice, social justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and distributive justice. And that is the promise our country has made, both under Millennium Development Goal from 2000 to 2015, and currently the Sustainable Development Goal from 2015 to 2030. And in all the 8 goals of Millennium Development and all the uh, 17 goals of sustainable development and 612 targets of sustainable development, the mandate is of gender mainstreaming. Another very important that to translate the gender commitments into the financial commitments, we need to analyze the situation of women, men, girls, boys in particular sector. Okay, assessing the gender responsiveness of the sectoral policies. Which are the sectoral policies which are very responsive to gender equality? We need to identify that. Assess the budget allocation. You may have an excellent scheme. You may have an excellent program like a integrated child development program or a Balika Samruddhi Yojana, because adolescent girls and boys who drop out from school because they can't cope up with maths and science and English after 7 standards, you see massive dropout among the boys of the marginalized section and also girls in a large number. So if you come up with a program that okay, they will not be in the formal education, but they will pick up vocational skills. So we need to find out that what kind of programs that we can start. Assessing budget allocation, monitoring and spending, and service delivery. That's also, so many can't remain just unutilized. It can't remain parked in the department ministry. It has to be used. And also assessing the outcome. That if you have invested in a health, if you have come up with the Janani Suraksha Yojana, because India's massive flagship program to reduce maternal mortality, because India has one of the highest maternal mortalities in the world. And even African countries have now better after Millennium Development Goal. Even African countries have moved ahead and they have reduced maternal mortality. While in India, if 85% of Indian women, like in 2000, they were anemic. Now it is reduced to 65%, but still it is very high. You're having low blood count or iron deficiency in your blood. And anemia becomes a major killer in Indian case, because as it is like women are so weak, the morbidity is very high, and small little illness can also be fatal among the anemic women. So we have to see that if Janani Suraksha Yojana and plus hospital-based delivery, because there was a time where 56% of women were delivering babies at home. They were not delivered by. So anytime there was a complex or complicated pregnancy, there were all chances for women to die, because if it required forceps, it required cesarean section. If the placenta is tied around the baby, both mother and child would die. And now with Janani Suraksha Yojana, which mandates that within half an hour of call, the van has to reach and take this woman to whichever hospital she likes. She is the one who chooses the nursing home where she wants to deliver baby, and the government would do the RTGS. They directly transfer the amount to that particular nursing home. Now, several states where the Janani Suraksha Yojana has been very effectively used and very judiciously implemented, we have seen the maternal mortality has gone down drastically. So assessing the outcome is also very important. Now, any type of gender budgeting, when we talk about gender responsive budgeting, there are 4 things we need to remember. One, the protective and the protective and schemes and services, protective services. So pension for widow, pension for destitute women, budget for shelter homes, rehabilitation centers for women survivor of violence. They come under the protective and welfare services. Social services, the budgetary provision for education, health, crash, working women's hostel, fuel, fodder, like Ujjwala scheme we have currently, fodder, water, housing, sanitation under COVID-19. Sanitation is a very important budgetary allocation, nutrition, midday meal, all they come under the social services. Third one is the regulatory services. Like most of the states in India have a state commission for women. Women cell within the police station. There are certain cities and states where you have all women police station, especially for the survivor of sexual violence, because they feel quite hesitant to tell their painful experience in front of men. So we do have so these regulatory services and also awareness generation about the program, like about what are the new schemes, what are the new legislations government has come up with, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, educate your women, various types of empowerment, the program, various types of scholarships and fellowships, all those things. Even about for that, we see sometimes, no, the one full newspaper is of the government public education advertisements. Even when the pandemic, like wherever there is a disaster, there are special awareness generation programs, and also workshops, training programs, capacity building of the governance people in the government, all of them. For that also budget is made. If we see the history of gender responsive budgeting, the first time it happened, it was in 1984, when the students organization, especially the women within the students organization, they demanded gender responsive budgeting from Australian government. Because in the industrialized world, in the rich countries, children are asked to be economically independent at the age of 15. So many parents, they say, "Okay, now you stay on your own. Now you become independent. You can't stay with us. 15th birthday ho gaya. Now you are independent." And it is very difficult for a young 15-year-old woman to negotiate the problems in the society. She would have to give up her study. Sometimes those who help her, they only take her advantage. Teenage pregnancy is a massive issue in the rich countries and all. And it is in this context that the women's students organization and youth organization in Australia demanded from the Australian government that how are you using, what percentage you are using for youth of this country, especially young women of this country, for their educational need, for their housing needs, for their employment orientation, and for the giving them, making them job ready and economically independent. And Australian government agreed. And in 1984, for the first time, they gave the gender responsive budgeting. After that, South Africa, we know that South Africa also toppled the apartheid regime, white regime of Botha, and Dr. Nelson Mandela became the president. That is the time when women members of African National Congress told their male leaders that, look, to fight against apartheid, both men and women have worked shoulder to shoulder. You are our brothers. White men were not concerned about African women, but you are our brothers. What are you going to do? Because African women were not even allowed to get education. So education, their health needs, their skill needs, their leadership needs, all this, how, what are you going to do? And in 1995, even South Africa started gender responsive budgeting. Following these two best practices, even the Commonwealth countries, which were earlier the colonies of British Empire, there also this training and gender responsive budgeting started. European Union, when European Union was formed, 40% seats in the European Parliament were allocated for women parliamentarians. And this women parliamentarian, they also demanded that in the European Union's budget, you have to tell, we have to have a gender responsive budgeting in this thing. And then currently, if we see, there are 84 countries in the world who are doing gender responsive budgeting. The route of gender responsive budgeting may be different. In Bangladesh, like the most powerful economically and politically, socially powerful institutions are NGOs. So it is NGOs who are taking, who are the entry point to gender responsive budgeting. In countries with ethnic strife or civil war, it is the military which is trained into gender budgeting. There are countries like in Afghanistan, when it was under Taliban, it was the UN peacekeeping force there, or UNHRC, United Nations Human Rights Council, that took initiative in gender responsive budgeting. So that in India, it is basically the elected representatives and bureaucrats and the administrators. They are the ones who are leading this mission. So in different countries, there are different routes in which gender responsive budgeting is promoted, implemented. Now, the strategies in gender responsive budgeting is first the increase in the budgetary allocation to fulfill practical and strategic needs. What are the practical needs? As I told you earlier, in practical needs, everyone in the community benefits. If you get a tapped water in the community, everyone is happy. Men are happy, women are happy, young, old, everyone is happy. If you get a bus stop in your house, in your society, in your neighborhood, everyone is happy. If there is electrification in the area, everyone is happy. The problem comes when there are strategic gender needs. Strategic gender needs completely, immediately changes the power balance between men and women. For example, Maharashtra in 1991 decided to allocate 30% seats in engineering college for women. That created tremendous backlash from the boys, because these boys were so angry, because they said that that was the time where, the new economic policy, the major focus is on infrastructure, and engineering was a coveted degree because all the engineers were getting absorbed in the economy. And the boys, and there was massive competition to get engineering seat. Even in IIT, the reservation policy is implemented. So the boys would be very angry that the friend of this boy with 92% marks doesn't get admission, while the woman with 88% mark gets the reserved seats. So that kind of anger was there. It was so difficult for the engineering college principals to counsel these boys, because that also it manifested in ragging of girls and sexual harassment at the work in the colleges and all. Finally, they had to organize special counseling for these boys who, and because these boys were very very bright, no, because they themselves had scored such high marks, but still they had such a strong aversion and strong anger against this kind of affirmative action. And when it was told that it is the historical injustice, for 5,000 years we have not allowed women to play any important role in a public life. And gender responsive budgeting, or the reservation quota, or a free ship to girls for education, these are the measures of affirmative action to compensate for the historical injustice. The way we do it for the scheduled caste, the way we do it for the scheduled tribe, the way we do it for the people with disability, all those who have been excluded from the chance to develop, these are affirmative actions are required. And finally, like now it is a accepted norm, and we know that Maharashtra has the highest number of women engineers who are even running metro and monorail, and even the long distance trains also they are running. We have one Miss Mumtaz who is also running a long distance train. uh, 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 so improving the quality of resources inputs, like gender training of public servants is very important. Greater funding certainty include the spending of the function, spending the funded as planned. So funding is very redistributing the budget allocation. If it is done in a going in a wrong direction, redesigning. For example, we have to deal with malnutrition. UNICEF had supported government of India, and we were distributing sukhada. No, sukhada made from jaggery, ghee, and wheat. It would be produced, mass production of sukhada used to happen in industrial estate, and then it was sent to different centers. And the outcome studies show that it was not helping. Children's nutrition standard did not improve. Not only that, so many of them fell ill. There were cases of food poisoning also, because by the time this sukhada reached those regions in a remote places, it was 8 to 10 days. Sometimes there were worms found in the sukhada. And after that, the whole scheme was abandoned, and it was decided to have a decentralized hot fresh meal, and the midday meal scheme was started. Okay, and the same budgetary allocation, but it immediately showed a very improved result, because fresh meal cooked by the people in the community in front of all, so that there is a transparency. And the Tamil Nadu model was very effective. Tamil Nadu had introduced midday meal right from the time of MGR, because when he was a child, he was very poor. And it was one neighbor of MGR who always used to give him thick sambar with all vegetables and rice. And when he became chief minister, the first thing he did was that in my state, no one will go hungry. The state would provide. All those who are hungry and rejected, socially excluded, will be fed by the state. So Tamil Nadu midday meal scheme, there were so many studies. And the way midday meal in Tamil Nadu was made, in the community, by the people in the community, because every region people have a different taste. Even if the same sambar would taste differently in different district, because people put different ingredients. So those people would relish food, and they would also see to it the quality is also good, because they are from the same community and people are watching. And they also converged midday meal scheme. It was for children, it was for pregnant and lactating mothers, and it was also for elderly people who were abandoned by their own relatives. So all of them would create a community, and it would be communality. So that model, so redistribution of budget allocation in a different way, changing the type and quality of goods and services which are delivered by the government, and also changing the policy outcome. So once you change your style and you make it more people friendly based on the evidence based findings, then that also improves the policy intervention. So what we saw in globally and in our country, that it was in 1972 where the United Nations asked all countries to come up with the ECOSOC, economic and social status of women in their own country. Why did it happen? It happened because of a disciple of Gunnar Myrdal. Many of you must be knowing Gunnar Myrdal, who wrote Asian Drama, who got Nobel Prize, and he also wrote Assault to World Poverty. Very, very important contribution he made. And Esther Bosrup was his disciple. Esther Bosrup wanted to understand polygamy in Africa. The way Western media, Hollywood and Western media, largely described African man as a human incarnation of a lust with 4 wives and 24 children and all kind of things. She wanted to understand African masculinity. She went and stayed. She did not go like a missionaries watching people and subaltern people from the gallery. She stayed with the people. She very closely examined labor processes and labor relations. And she found out that African society did not have pressure on land. There were ample land. People were limited because for 500 years, African men were shipped to build they were taken as slaves, right, from 13th century to 19th century, they were taken and to build the empire, the merchants and all of you, many of you must have read, no? Pirates of Caribbean. So these are the, so there was always more women in Africa than men. There were 2,500 women for 1,000 men. Okay, 1:2.5 ratio. Africa did not have domestic animal. They had only wild animal. So they did not have cows, buffaloes, horses, donkeys, to which could be used for agriculture. Africa did not have agriculture technology. In India, in India, Indus civilization, even 5,000 years back in Mohenjo-daro, also we had plow. Africa did not have it. Currently, you must be watching Netflix and Amazon films where African farmers are digging. They use the digging stick, which requires tremendous human labor. Fourth, African culture did not discriminate in food, nurturance, and care with boys and girls. They were given same treatment. So if you see the physic body mass index of African men and women, all of them are tall, broad shoulder, have a heavy capacity to do, major capacity to do heavy work. That means women were used to doing heavy work. Okay. Fifth one is that it, if you have more women and more children, you can cultivate more land because there is no pressure on land. That means for concentration and centralization of economic power, as a result, you also get social capital, you also get political power, you also become culturally strong. It is the patriarchy was there. Patriarchy was universal, everywhere it was there. Manifestation of patriarchy in Africa were very different. Okay, so all these factors combined together created a situation of polygamy in Africa. And what she wanted to know in economics, we have a concept called externality. If you have industrialization, you get pollution. Okay, so that is negative externality. But in Esther Bostrup's study, what is the positive externality? She wanted to understand polygamy. What she ended up finding out, that women are central to food security and food sovereignty of Africa. So don't call women a beneficiary of the economy. Take out women from the rubric of welfare to the rubric of economic development. So women are economically, they are the agents of development, whole subsistence production in the world, because man had to go to, they had to migrate to the cities to get cash. The moment the colonialism, or moment the British rulers, or moment the imperialist rule came, land was commoditized. You had to pay all your taxes in cash. While the subsistence economy did not have cash. So man had to migrate to earn cash, even after liberation of African countries after 1960. So they said it was the women, the whole subsistence production in the world is dependent on women's labor. And that's why the approach called WID, VID, women in development, but still the development process after Second World War, because the world development was came into currency after Second World War, when the Europe was destroyed. Okay, before that, if you read Adam Smith, Ricardo, Malthus, all are talking of growth, growth, growth. Okay, so development where the overall quality of people's quality of life has to be improved, because that's what the World War had done. World War had destroyed the economies after economies, no? And they had to be uh, uh, they had to be developed. But in this development process, women who suffered the most during World War, women who managed the economy when men were fighting at the front, they were the ones who were bypassed. And that's what Esther Bosrov says, that you can't have a laissez-faire. Market is not a solution. Markets are socially constructed. Markets are also functioning, operating according to the intersectionalities and the multiple marginalities of caste, class, race, ethnicity, religion, and geographical location. So you need affirmative action. And we have to, women have been thrown out at the margin, whether it's a green revolution, blue revolution, a white revolution, all of them have thrown out women in the margin. We have to bring them back to the mainstream. That is called WID approach. So WID approach, where the United Nations asked all member countries, 165 member countries, to come up with the status of women's report. Our country also did. We had a 21-member interdisciplinary committee. This committee, unlike any other government committee, did not sit in a chamber and wrote the report. They traveled extensively. They interviewed people. They met people with different sectors of the economy. And that's why Towards Equality report became a landmark. It was debated in the parliament. It was ready by 1974. 1975 was declared by the United Nations as International Women's Year, in which 165 countries submitted their Status of Women's Committee report. The statistical wing of the United Nations came up with the macro level statistical exercise for the world economy, which showed that women constituted 1/2 of the world's population. They did 2/3 of the world's work. What is 2/3 of the world's work? Paid work, which is done in the offices or factories or mines, and unpaid work. Okay, whatever work women do, we are not talking of cooking, cleaning, carrying. We are talking of unpaid family labor in the handicraft, in the cottage industry, in the household-based production, collection of fuel, fodder, water, animal care, kitchen gardening. If women did not do this work, you would have to purchase these services or goods. Okay. So with this understanding, what we saw that the global call for gender equality that came with 1975, United Nations declared 1975 to 85 as a International Women's Decade, in which a lot of deliberations took place. Country level deliberations started happening. Government, for the first time, we started Women and Child Development Department within the HRD Ministry in 1986. It was started, and local initiatives also started happening, like a Women in Development. So many affirmative actions were taken within the, like, we first thing we got was Equal Remuneration Act 1976, series of legal reforms we got, and we also got so many charging differential rate of interest in the bank in the 80s. If we see, many affirmative actions were taken. And then also the another thing which women's movement brought out was the violence against women. That was not there in any of the status report of the countries, but it was the women's movement, growing women's movement, which also invited the attention to varied forms of violence against women, right? Whether it was a female infanticide or female PT-side, that also happened in India. It started happening after 1972, sex selective abortions, dowry murders, domestic violence, street violence, gang rape. So violence became a very important mission or important agenda of the women's movement. and also livelihood and support services. So all these concerns were, and also gender sensitization of the existing decision making bodies. And as a result, what we get the outcome is a gender empowerment, more like a broadened potential for social capacity building, and also greater people's participation. So the moment we talk about the political decentralization through Panchayati Raj institutions, then that also happens at a grassroots level. So this whole genesis of Towards Equality report, debate of Towards Equality report, which brought out three startling facts of India: declining sex ratio, declining work participation rate, and extremely high maternal mortality, which poverty alone cannot explain, because there are countries poorer than India, but their women's survival chances are higher. That means there is something cultural. Why in India women eat last, least, and left over? So that is a cultural practice. There are gender norms which need to be changed. Because of this debate on Towards Equality report, sixth five-year plan started a separate chapter called Women in Development. So women were brought out. There was a paradigm shift in the Planning Commission. So from welfare to development. Shram Shakti report, when Ila Ben Bhatt was selected as a Rajya Sabha member, she did an extremely important exercise of finding out at a national level what is the labor power of women in the unorganized sector and the self-employed women were doing, because 92% of the women workforce is in unorganized sector. National Perspective Plan for Women, whose member secretary was Madam Margaret Arwa, Honorable Minister, HRD, and it gave a perspective from 1988 to 2000. Eighth five-year plan also talked about all the benefits from the different sectors should not bypass women, and any anti-poverty program, it should be focusing on women, and it should be overall general development program. With that, there should be targeted intervention with greater sensitivity, gender sensitivity. Ninth five-year plan gave the idea of women component plan. So the way we have a scheduled caste plan, we have a tribal sub plan, same way we should have a 30% of the funds or benefits earmarked in all women related sector. And the 10th, 11th and 12th plan, they demanded convergence of women component plan as well as and gender responsive budgeting. And currently the Niti Aayog also continues the same legacy. So gender budget analysis is very important to focus on the neglected aspects and provide women with the vital information regarding content and focus of existing government policies. And with this information, we can challenge the policymakers and demand changes in the policies as per the needs and choices. It also demands greater transparency, deepening of democracy, not only just equality on paper or in constitutional guarantee, but also in praxis, in our day-to-day lived experiences, and also compensating for historical injustice just through affirmative action. So the official discourse projects man as a breadwinner, but women are burdened with so many problems, such as low literacy, not given equal opportunity for education. They get lower wages for the same kind of work. Even when the state is employer, like MG Narega, women are, de facto, women get 1/3 of the wages, because the contractors also have the same patriarchal bias. Unpaid care work, which women do, high mortality rate, and also gender-based violence. So to bridge this kind of a gap in the critical areas, because of this reality. This reality results in a gap in the economic participation. When we have a 55 to 60 to 58% work participation of Indian men, we have 17% of work participation of women. Men's work participation has remained more or less the same, but women's work participation is drastically going downward. Economic opportunities, very limited opportunities women have, mostly in the dead-end job, monotonous job, and also informal sector job, where there is a law of jungle, there is no protection, no social security, no social protection. Political empowerment only when it comes to Panchayati Raj institution, which is more or less an extension of housework. There women are there, but when it comes to legislature and parliament, political empowerment is very limited. In fact, as compared to our neighboring countries like a Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Pakistan or Afghanistan, Indian women's percentage in parliament is much lower. All those countries have quota. They have a reservation for women in the parliament. Educational attainment, again, women mostly, the gender agrees when it comes to professional education, women they have a very low participation. When it comes to health and well-being, also malnutrition, morbidity, maternal this thing, anemia, calcium deficiency, all these are much pronounced among women and girls. So this is historical neglect and also institutionalized hegemony of male domination, subordination of women, results in a gap between the formal equality and substantive equality. And even among them, those who are the most marginalized, who are Dalit, tribal, disabled, Muslim, HIV positive women, all these women, they suffer the most. That's why the gender responsive budgeting, that as an exercise, is very important to fulfill the promise given by Women Empowerment Policy, which was adopted in 2001, which promised to fully empower women politically, educationally, economically, and legally. That's why, see, if our final goal is gender equality, we begin with the poverty alleviation. Good governance is very important. Accountability is important. Transparency, to prevent corruption and leakage. Economic efficiency, where you try to involve as all the able-bodied people into nation building and create an environment of level playing field ecosystem, which is through affirmative action, you ensure gender equity, and a gender responsive budget is concerned with all these aspects. So, for transforming the gender promises who into budgetary promises, elected representatives, motivated civil servants, NGOs, citizens organizations, they play very important role. And all of them have to, right from Panchayati Raj institutions and civil society organizations, they are very important. So gender responsive budgeting has to bridge the uh, gap between what do people want. Different people, sections of society have a different demand. Children want more playground, they want reading room, they want library, they want more schools. The demands of women, they are about the intervention in health and education. People with disability, people, elderly people, all of them have their, so collecting them, doing the need assessment through micro planning and taking the needs and the demands of the people to the government. So it's a two-way communication that we have. We have also seen over last 20 years, you can say, yeah, in 91, we all started doing, government of India asked the Women's Studies Center to do the gender audit of particular schemes within the country. And we have seen in last 30 years, wherever the budgetary allocation for women's program have been really substantial and implemented very judiciously, it has resulted into empowerment. We have seen that in the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. We have seen in the women's in the area of education. We have also seen in the reduction of maternal mortality. We have seen in the area of reduction in the child marriages, which were 45% some 20 years back. Now it is reduced to 22%. Budgetary cuts have also reduced opportunity for women, that we have seen privatization of higher education wherever it has happened. The women's education has suffered. Structural adjustment program, globalization, they have increased women's unpaid work burden, and thereby women provided subsidy to the economy. Because if there is a devaluation of rupee, if there is a price rise, if there is erosion of PDS, if there is agrarian crisis, if there is unemployment, it is women who have to produce 2 meals. So they will do anything to any kind of a lowest paying job. They would multitask 4 or 5 jobs they will do, but to get 2 square meal to family members. So that's how they are subsidizing. So the policy appraisal that we do about the gender equality, we try to transform it and translate it into budgetary commitment, and then we do the audit whether to what extent the targeted funds, functions, and functionaries have resulted into equity, equality, and empowerment. So gender responsive budgeting is a process that entails incorporating gender perspective at various stages: planning, policy making, program formulation, assessment of needs of the target groups, allocation of resources, and the implementation of all the programs, impact assessment. And if in the impact assessment, if you see that there is something, public fund is used in a wrong, going in a wrong direction, you can reprioritize the resources. In fact, there is a strong lobby which says that if there is a peace in South Asia, so much of fund which goes into destructive purpose will be used for the developmental purpose. So that for that, all 9 SAARC countries, they have to come together. Now, what we have seen in our country, like over the years, the percentage of GDP for, like United Nations has advised all countries to allocate at least 5% of GDP for gender budgeting. While in our country, we have seen there is a continuous decrease, or it's less than 1% of the GDP which goes to gender budgeting. So gender economists are continuously negotiating that more allocation should be made. If you see the whole history of 5-year plan, in that term, gender responsive budgeting was not there, okay, till the 9th plan. But sensitivity, as the sensitivity about women's question or women's problems developed, the budgetary allocation started increasing. So the first 5-year plan had a central social welfare board, basically because of the request made by 3 women who were managing refugee camps at the time of partition. Mrudula Sarabhai and Mrs. Mehta and Kamalaben Patel. Pushpaben Mehta, Kamalaben Patel, and Mrudula Sarabhai, when they were asked to take a ministerial berth after India became independent, they refused. They said they were not interested in politics, but what they were interested, if the government respected, they told Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, if you respect our work, because they managed the refugee camps and they had nothing, no money, nothing. They had only All India Radio, Akashvani, in which they were making announcement, iski beti, इसके भाई, इसके ये परिवार से अकेली है रेफ्यूजी कैंप में, कैन somebody come and take her. So but there was thousands of women who were abandoned by their own families, and these women were Hindu women, Muslim women, Sikh women. And this they told Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru that it is the duty of the state. Their family members, in-laws and their natal family are not ready to take them. It is the duty of the state to look after them. And that's why they said that Central Social Welfare Board should be started. And Government of India started Central Social Welfare Board in 1953 with allocation of 4 crore rupees. And currently, if you see the latest budget 2021-22, the allocation is 1,53,326 crore. But still, as compared to, if you compare it with the GDP, it comes to less than 1%. But it is very important that your situational analysis, your gender sensitivity percolates into more financial commitment. And that's what we have seen throughout the history of planning. First 5-year plan, India adopted family planning as a state policy. I'm not talking about birth control. Birth control, couple decides whether to have children, how many children, at what interval. But the Pandit Nehru was projected as a brand ambassador who had only one daughter. And Indian men were asked to use contraception, which did not happen. So the second 5-year plan allocated budget for 30,000 Mahila Mandals and convinced these women, Chota Parivar, Sukhi Parivar. Third 5-year plan, by then, so many CAP studies, knowledge, attitude, practice studies have shown that educated women have less children and working women have less children. So they started women's education and mother and child approach. That was the earmark in a third and fourth 5-year plan. And it also said that if we improve child survival, if we improve maternal health, then also we will be able to have less birth, because those were the days where Indian women had to produce 6.2 children to see to it that 2 of them reach adulthood. That means either children would die of cholera or pneumonia or any other waterborne diseases. That was the kind of sanitation India had. I'm talking of 50s. And that's why the mother MCH approach, mother and child approach, for which government had given budgetary allocation. Fifth five-year plan, I told you, it coincided with the debate of towards equality report in Indian parliaments. Women were shifted from welfare to development. WEED approach was adopted. Sixth five-year plan started giving separate chapter called Women and Development, and definition of development and the indicators of development which were chosen was health, education, and employment as per the international discourse. Because these women, they said that modernization or white revolution or green revolution had not contributed to women. We want this indicator, education, health, and employment. Seventh five-year plan, where the people like Jaya Arunachalam in Working Women's Forum in Tamil Nadu, Ila Bhatt in Self-Employed Women's Organization, the Dastakar, that women artisans platform which was created, all of them challenge WEED approach. They say, what are you talking of integrating women in development? This development itself is a hierarchical. Women are at the bottom of the hierarchy. What development is going one way, women are in other way. So what we want is women and development. Women should get united. They should form their organization. They should, with the strength of their number, they should bargain with the society. That approach is called WAD approach, WAD. WAD approach had influenced 8th five-year plan. And the 9th five-year plan, we started talking of, it was after the Nairobi conference, and we started talking about from development to empowerment. It is not only education, health, and employment, but also political empowerment. So the question on 8th five-year plan, which talked about empowerment as a measure, what we got was 73rd and 74th amendment in the Constitution of India. With one stroke of pen, this amendment brought 1 million Indian women, 10 lakh Indian women, they came to public life in the Panchayati Raj institutions, both in urban and rural areas. And currently, 20 states which have accepted 50% reservation, we have 14 lakh Indian women elected representatives in Panchayati Raj institutions. 9th five-year plan talked about women component plan, 10th five-year plan talked about convergence. And now we see that as the sensitivity, gender sensitivity enhances, the budgetary allocation also enhances. That means मांगे बिना माँ भी खाना नहीं देती. तो सरकार माई बाप को भी हमें बोलना पड़ता है. You have to articulate your concern. You have to amplify the voice of for gender concerns. Earlier, we used to critique the budget after budget was presented. In recent times, we have seen government has started, several state governments and even the union government invites the gender economist, NGOs. In fact, when Dr. Saida Hamid was in planning commission, she was in planning commission for 2 terms of 5 years. She started a cell called Window to Civil Society. And there the citizens were invited to tell their problems before budget making, so that planning commission would earmark those areas. No, so that was a very good exercise where you got the feedback from the people from different sectors. Several subcommittees were, hundreds of subcommittees were formed by planning commission, and they would have a 3-hour session, and people would make sharp presentations about for that, whether it's a girl education or primary education or in early childhood education or college education. So if it is education budget, same way for Ministry of Steel and Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Tribal Affairs budget. So in this budget now, what we do is that we review the public expenditure profile of the previous years. We conduct the beneficiary incidence analysis or whatever reports which are given to us, that in what way it has benefited. Recommend changes in the operational guidelines. For example, operational guidelines of Working Women's Hostel or operational guidelines for Swadhar scheme for women in difficult circumstances, which had made earlier mandatory for any proposal which was sent to the government. You have to own land or own a building. If you own a land, government would give you money to construct hostel. If you have building, money, government would give you money for rent, okay, or basic expenditure of the salary of the hostel warden and all that. So what happened? Most of the genuine organizations did not have land. They did not even have building. But all the people who were running brothel, they had land and they also had ghar. So many places where these women in difficult circumstances, it was for them, it was from frying pan to fire. because these women were taken over by these pimps and procurers and they were made to do prostitution. Big scams came out. After that, the design was changed, and then they said that okay, even if you don't have land, you can rent a place, and you can government would allow the genuine, like the complete KYC would be done. What is the nature of your NGO? What kind of transparency it has? How are people, different state groups see your NGO? So all those things they said, and now so many women's organizations are running women's hostel as well as they are running the Swadhar homes for women in difficult regions. So active participation, people's participation, women's participation, state group participation is very important at all three levels. There are women specific schemes. Anytime you see any budget which is given to you, whether a bank gives you or your NGO gives you or your education is, Jamia Millia Islamia is the one university where I was so happy that they had done the gender responsive budgeting, and they said, well, how is the university using its resources, whether it is a gymkhana or women development cell or a hostel or a library, in what way they had given a complete allocation of resources of the university on with a gender lens. So women specific schemes where 100% allocation is required to be spent on women and Ministry of Women and Child Development, that is 100%. Pro women scheme where 30% of minimum 30% of allocation of benefits should go, whether it is MG Narega, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Skill India, Stand Up India, Startup India, Make in India, entrepreneurship scheme. That is the that is the ideal situation, which is not there, but that's what we are demanding. Gender neutral scheme meant for the benefit of community, like there are like Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana, Gram Vikas Yojana, all these are meant for whole community, but still women also benefit, they are gender neutral. Fourth one is a residual scheme, like you have a Suman, one this year you have tsunami, so your budget maker, your state will keep money for disaster. If you have earthquake, you will always keep money for earthquake for the subsequent year. We had floods in Mumbai, so always our municipal corporation keeps some money aside for coping with the flood. But suppose in this particular year there is no flood or tsunami or earthquake, what do? The money remains, it is there. But still, if you are convinced, if you are able to convince the authorities, if you are able to discuss it in the elected body, whether it's a Vidhan Sabha or your municipal corporation meeting, standing committee, if you say that, okay, we can use this money for gender responsiveness, then it is possible. You can do that. Role of the women empowerment policy, which the government of India has come up, which talks about in womb to tomb approach, right from the time a child is in the tummy of a mother till that person becomes ages. It has to, every stage of a life cycle has to be touched by the women empowerment policy, and that's why some of the flagship programs, whether it's Indira Awas Yojana, now it has made it mandatory to have a joint name. Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Yojana, Scholarship for Minority, when the Sachar Committee submitted report and the Ministry of Minority Affairs was formed. In the initial years, there was nothing about gender. But when the suggestions were given, now we have a separate like scholarship, enterprise development, and the leadership development scheme for minority women. Same with the MG Narega scheme also, that we have to like the gender responsiveness in terms of equal opportunity, equal treatment, and equal wages, that is there. Still, there are many unresolved issues in our gender responsive budget exercise in India, because in 2006, the finance ministry started implementing gender responsive budgeting. Currently, 18 states are implementing it. Still, we have a long way to go. There are several union territories and states. They have to still start the processing because they don't have enough people with this kind of a vision capacity. That means capacity building training programs, they have to be initiated. You have to sit with the politician, you have to sit with the bureaucrats, you have to sit with the people in Mantralaya and Sachivalaya to convince them that they should start doing. So that is one very important challenge. Widow's pension is a very controversial issue, that giving cash in the hand of a widow who is herself so powerless within family or community. Can't we use part of this money to create a community center, counseling center, training center, so that they can become economically independent, and they can also have a community life, as it is widows are so socially excluded and lonely. Women friendly transport, after 2013 Nirbhaya tragedy, increasingly the demand is made that public transport, safe public transport managed by the local self-government bodies or the state government must become a norm. Just currently we see hardly very few cities like Bombay or Calcutta or Chennai or Delhi, you have affordable public transport. Housing for women, 10% of the housing for women headed household. Currently, we have All India Ekal Nari Sangatna who have demanded that widows, divorcees, deserted, and women who are single, we should have a special both in private sector and public sector. And currently, migrant crisis has also shown that we should have a low rent housing for the migrant women workers. Currently, only Kerala has a hostel for workers, migrant workers. No other state has come up with the scheme. Financial inclusion by bank during 80s and 90s, we used to have a differential rate of interest was charged. Andhra Pradesh is the only state which charges differential rate of interest from women entrepreneurs, which is very important because women entrepreneurs don't very limited social capital they have. Banks also don't consider them credit worthy. Most of the time, we have only 9% of women as entrepreneurs, and there what is the investment? 50,000 to 2 lakh rupees, that too after selling their gold or borrowing money from friends and neighbors and relatives they have. Banks even don't help them. So we have to oh, that kind of a prejudice against women entrepreneurs, women who want to start startup, that also needs to be given attention to. A women component in the flagship program, which has a huge funding, 15,000 crore, 20,000 crore, 28,000 crore, 1 lakh and 10,000 crore, like Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana. No, you are. So in this allocations of education, water, health, sanitation, public toilets, housing, insurance, skill development, I think we need to say that whatever promise of women component, at least 30% beneficiary should be there, but that data is not given in public. We have not got so far. Underpayment of women workers, NRHM, we all applaud Asha workers, we all applaud Anganwadi workers, how bravely they work. They were the Corona warriors. They were working for 12, 15 hours for COVID detection, and they worked in the COVID centers, and they also managed the crisis when the hospitals were converted maternity ward into COVID ward. Pregnant women, women in labor, all of them were assisted by these women, but still they are not treated as a worker. They are treated as volunteer and they are given honorarium. They don't even get minimum wages. So this is a long-standing demand, and this year also the gender economists have given, and the Women Policy Collective has given a memorandum to the government that they should be regularized. Absence of women-friendly approach in the opportunities like Skill India, Stand Up India, Startup India, Make in India, none of them have done gender mainstreaming. And there is a tremendous bias against even industrial training institutes. We have some 300 state-of-the-art industrial training institutes. Why are they giving only training of tailoring and at the most screen printing, which is even redundant? Screen printing in today's context is redundant. Why, except for 4 southern states, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka, why there is such a strong aversion for giving technical training to women? So I think that is also, so we demand quota, financial support to women entrepreneurs, and supportive scheme for transgender community, which is now articulating, and it has also nationally also they have started organizing. Conditional cash transfer, because of the efforts of gender responsiveness of the civil society organizations, NGOs, women's groups, gender economists, state commissions for women, we have got some important schemes such as conditional cash transfer scheme to provide cash directly to pregnant and lactating mothers. Okay, the second one is the Beti Bachao Abhiyan. Under that, some 18 states have given conditional cash transfer for a birth of a girl. If you don't kill your daughter, you allow her to be born, you get 10. The government opens account of 10,000 rupees. If you inoculate her, if she's given anti-polio vaccination, another 10,000. If she goes to school, another 10,000. If she finishes primary school, 10,000. Secondary school, 10,000. Schooling finished and entering university, 10,000. So by the time she's 21, the state gives her 1 lakh rupees, which she can use for her future. This thing. So incentivization of girls, this we learned from several Latin American countries because they introduce conditional cash transfer for eradication of child labor. So if you send your child to a school, that day's minimum wages are credited in the account of a child. And that's what the Brazil, Argentina, all of them did, and we are using this for Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Creche scheme for working parents, it's not only for women, but even the father with a child can use, and that is now there is a separate budgetary allocation. You have to send the proposal to get government funding to start creche. And in several states, several cities, like they have started this. Rehabilitation of trafficked women and girls, that is because so many trafficked women and girls refuse to go back to their in-laws or to their own families. Like in Bombay also we had this Operation Help, where girls in the court only, they were just hugging us and they say, Appa mujhe mat bhejo. They are the pimps, they will again sell me. So the state looks after them. Nirbhaya Fund for girls and women, that is the most heartbreaking reality, where hardly 38% of Nirbhaya Fund is being used. Since 2013, we have 1,000 crore, which can be carried forward because Nirbhaya Fund can't be diverted. And need to recognize women's centrality across settle all 8 sectors of the economy. We need to do the gender mainstreaming. The gender economists like us are demanding separate listing for gender related funding in the budget, which Maharashtra government, this week only Maharashtra government submitted budget. They gave us 2 separate statements, child budget and also women's budget. So that is the demand of a child rights organization, to give a separate statement. No diversion of women component fund, 30%, which is of the total in different ministries and department. Transparency about allocation and utilization of funding. Right to information. You can't silence right to RTI workers. Currently, an activist from Gujarat, he asked for the diversion of fund under RTI. He has been murdered by the vested interest. Inclusion of gender economists in the pre-budget workshop by all state governments. Provision for a composite program for women and girls under education, health, rural development sector, with specific targeting to women and girls, and restrictions on reappropriation. You can't use money earmarked for gender purpose for any other purpose, just because if your money is unutilized, you just can't say let us buy 10 vehicles, or let us do the interior designing of our office or MLA hostel. You can't do that. It has to be used only for that. So to engender the budget at a panchayat level, or right from state government and union government, we need to go through very seriously. We should go through the human development reports of the state, policy documents, and also see to it that whether it is in consonance, it is in harmony with whatever promises that are made. The major challenge that we are facing this day in gender responsive budget is non-utilization of funding. All MLAs, MPs, corporators are given funding for area development. Some of the star MLAs and MPs have not even suggested one scheme for area development. So fund remains unutilized. So I think that the answerability and accountability of utilizing the allocated amount is also very important. The National Commission for Women, State Commission for Women, they are the nodal agencies, and they have to play proactive role in gender responsive budgeting, capacity building, sensitizing, because who makes the budget? It's not the IAS officer who makes budget. It is the finance department, those clerks and accountants who are making budget. So convincing them, like taking this exercise in a regional language, talking to them, giving them example, doing the situational analysis at a local level, and that's why gender responsive budgeting becomes effective when there is a bottom up budgeting. You sit with the people, like sitting with the elected representatives, the way my journey began in 1994 onwards, or a green budget, the way Waterman of India in Rajasthan, Mr. Singh, he started green budgeting to stop desertification of Rajasthan, and where in the social forestry program, how women were involved, and joint forest management, where state can't use women only as a daily wager. They also have equal stake in greenification of the area. Learning from the Right to Pee campaign, in city like Bombay, 40 NGOs came together to demand public toilets for women. We have 2,300 public toilets for men in city of Mumbai. And whenever you discuss with the commissioner, he says, yeah, we need them. No, we have so many taxi drivers and rickshaw drivers and so many informal sector workers for them. But why don't we have public toilets for women? There are only 112 public toilets in Mumbai, which are also not clean for women, and they are unusable. So these young women they came together, they started Right to P campaign, they examined and went through the sanitation budget, which is BMC. Our budget is 40% of BMC budget is on sanitation, and how to come up with this kind of facilities. And also formation of gender budget cells in each and every department. Now, even for the educational institution, NAC also demands gender audit, financial audit, safety audit, green audit. So gender audit has come even in the educational sector. Globally, what we have seen that under Corona, out of 204 countries on this planet, 191 countries are members of the United Nations, and only 25 countries very proactively worked to combat Corona. How did they do it? Their national leaders, presidents and prime ministers and health ministers, they increased the public health budget. They provided all the facility. People, their choice between people and profit, they chose people. And out of these 25 countries, 18 countries had women head up. Women were the head, political head. We saw 45 countries did not do anything at all. They said, "Nahi, Corona is just a virus, kya hone wala hai?" And they did not prepare at all. They just allowed people to die. Remaining countries, 126 also, they were pragmatic. Only when the elite of that country, ministers and elected representatives and president and prime minister, when they got COVID, they started functioning. They came up with some mechanism that too more like a private sector, not public investment and all. So the globally people are now saying that what are we talking about women in development? Let us talk of women-led development. Okay. So local and global implications of pro-poor and pro-women budgeting, they have been documented. There are alternative macroeconomic scenarios. Currently, we saw how New Zealand, Nordic countries, even Kerala, the way they responded. In fact, right, yesterday only they released the gender responsive budgeting of Kerala state in the midst of Corona. Serious examination of budget calls for greater transparency. So we have to tell the international financial institutions like World Bank and IMF not to pressurize the developing country to reduce social sector budget. It is very important to invest in education. It is important to invest in public health. It is important to invest in skill building of the population. Then only the economy can come up and people can have a better quality of life. And that's why providing training, capacity building workshops for the decision makers in government structures from local to global level, even the parliamentarians and our media is extremely important. These are some of the links which I have shared, mainly because they are some of the best practices in what we gender responsive budgeting exercise and the implementation change the scenario. There is a very good case study of Mysore. How did Mysore city reduce the maternal mortality rate by gender responsive budgeting? That case study is there. Bottom up budget exercise by Sangamma Srinivasan Foundation in Bangalore. That is also there. Then we have experiences of Morocco, Indonesia, Philippines, Timor Leste, Brazil, most of the developing countries. How have they implemented this thing? We were taken for a study tour of Penang city, where a woman member of parliament who herself grew in that slum, one of the poorest shanties of the city, and how after becoming a member of parliament, she did gender responsive budgeting, the complete need assessment, bring financial allocation, and that whole area, how she made it socially inclusive, where there were elderly people, there were young people, there were transgender community, there were people from disability, various types of disability, living and sharing community. There were certain areas which were common for people, community center, reading room, even common cooking facility for elderly people, because it's dangerous for them to this thing to use the very old people. They can't cook, so there's a community place where they can come. So even with the same amount of money which is allocated for any housing project, the vision and sensitivity with which she has used the money, that was a very inspiring experience and doable. It is doable agenda. These are some of the references. All are available online. Lekha Chakravarti's articles, you must be seeing, I think this week only she has written 2-3 articles on budget and COVID budget also. So they are National Institute of Public Finance and Policy Making, which plays very important role in making in our country's budget. Kirti Nakri's budget, she has done her PhD from IIT on gender budgeting, and she has linked up with the gender sensitive policy. The UN Women has several important studies on India in terms of gender budgeting. So you can refer to that. So our ultimate goal with the gender responsive budgeting is to create a just and egalitarian society.
Thank you so much. What an enlightening talk of around almost 145 minutes without losing my interest, consistently, just focusing on each words coming from you. It was really, really very interesting. I'm just
Thank
keeping
you,
the
sir.
house open for some questions. I think Kalpana has raised the hand for long. Hmm. He may be having something to say. You can unmute and say something. Hmm. I yeah,
Hi, Vibhuti.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kalpana.
Yeah, Vibhuti, excellent. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting. And I mean, I am so much, happy to see, all the project and all the budget mm, is provided for all the developments and all by the system. But as long as we will not be able to change the social structure, it is it get failed. How just we were referring about the panchayat raj, panchayat. So there also what happens, the sarpanch, because they have to elect a woman for the seat with the reservation, the women are there. But we are from villages. Our native is from village, so we are very much aware about how things are going on in villages. The sarpanch is there in villages, but the chair is always occupied by the either her husband or the influencer. So many, still crisis or things are that we have to.
See, that's why the capacity building and boosting the morale, there is strength in numbers. So wherever women are united, like I give you example of Kutch. There is Kutch has a Kutch Mahila Vikas Sanstha. They have a Panchayat Mahiti Kendra. So they do the capacity building of these women who are Parda Nashin, who have this much of Parda, no? Jat women and all. And when father-in-law, they had, it was their monopoly to control panchayat. And when the reservation happened, father-in-law chose the youngest daughter-in-law, who was a very chulbuli and titli. They used to call her that she's a chulbuli and she's very playful and childish. No, he deliberately chose this daughter-in-law to contest election. But even in reserved seat, there was a competition because there were women from other caste also who were contesting election. So willy-nilly, they had to allow this daughter-in-law to do campaigning. So she was campaigning. She did door-to-door campaigning. And that was the first exposure for this woman who was always under parda, means like Hindu parda, okay, the Gugat, apne jane kahiye na. The Gugat she was under. And she had to go to Dalit Basti, she had to go to Rajput Basti, she had to go to all Bastis, and their women were asking, we don't have well, will you get well? If you get elected, will you use the panchayat money to dig a well? We don't have any fodder for our animals. Will you ensure fodder from government? And she started saying yes, yes, yes. She got elected also. And then father-in-law says, Bahu, but now you sit at home. I will run the panchayat.
I will run. That's what.
No. But then you see what this child said. She says, Sasurji, I will give you hot chapati as a daughter-in-law. In the home, you are my Sasur, I am your daughter-in-law. I will be obedient. I will not abide. I will not rebel against you. But now, I have promised women of the village. And I will do whatever Kutch Mahila Vikas Kendra tells me. I'll go to work a training program. And I met that woman. Because see, Tata's, after earthquake, Tata's had poured in a lot of money for the rehabilitation. So I had to go for the impact evaluation. No? that for 20 years of Tata's helps, in what way it empowered women and all. And I met this woman, there was a complete transformation. So I have seen many, because I have been into training right from 94. I know hurdles are there. We have seen that how they would put cow dung on the chair when the women Sarpanch fought there, how they use no confidence motion and all. But now see this year, the same Bombay Municipal Corporation in 94, where all these women were ridiculed by male corporators, that you are Adani. Adani means stupid.
Yeah.
You don't know anything. You are just come up in a nice clothes, and the only utility you have is just to offer flowers when the leaders come, or to garland a leader, or to do flag hoisting on 15th August and 26th January. That is the only utility you have. Bombay Municipal has crores of rupees. Their Maharashtra budget is less than that of Bombay. Bombay Municipal Corporation ka budget is more than that of government of Maharashtra. What do you know? Now this year, in the midst of COVID pandemic, woman corporator gave a 4.5-hour speech without referring to any paper on how BMC should use its budget under COVID. Okay. And because she had a pulse in last 4 elections, like right from 94 to this, these women have now got exposure. They just don't sit in their office. They are moving. They are moving in their constituency. They are talking to everyone. Wherever they go, they don't use vehicle. They use public transport. They are going by BEST. They are going by train. You meet all your corporators. They all are there, very easily accessible. People are not even scared of them. They all go and mob them and they talk to them. They knew the ground reality. And they knew how to, they were the ones who gave, where do we need COVID center? Where do we need containment zone? Where do we need a detection zone? How many women volunteers do we need for the door-to-door corona test? How many people who don't have hungry or who have gone hungry? Who are the socially excluded people? Here the transgender community has not got food. Here the sex workers are not given food. Here the children, no women-headed household, they are in that Harijan Basti, no food packets have reached. All this data, these women corporators knew. Others were having secret meetings with them. Others were having secret meetings with them. Others were having secret meetings with them. Others were having
Am I audible?
Countries. Just now you gave a list of the
84,
countries where the women are. Women are the leaders, and they have opted for, I mean, the people health against
See,
men
Rwanda has a 65% women MLAs, because ethnic cleansing killed all men. The whole nation building was done by women. And you see the in a gender development index, where was Rwanda 20 years back and where is it now? It is comparing with the Nordic countries, no? So
anyway, thank you very much.
Can we proceed to another question?
Really enjoy.
Yeah.
Any other observation, because we are getting late. It's already 2 hours, and it's very rare to see a speaker after speaking 1.5 hours, more than that, and is still very energetic to respond and take up the questions. It's really amazing and rare combination. I can guess it from your lectures that there are lots of takeaways. I cannot count on it. There was nothing. There was no WH question which was uncovered in your presentation. There was why, there was how, there was what, there was who, there was when. So idea is it cannot have a question unanswered. I can secure what is, what ought to be. So all situations, there were gaps, there were challenges, there were things what are happening. There were contexts. So the means you have just encapsulated the entire of gender discourse into a nutshell from uh, thousands years of the marginalities. You have highlighted the cross-sectional marginalities, that the woman is not a woman alone, that a woman has to experience lots of marginalities, being a Dalit woman, being a poor woman, being a Muslim woman, because lots of baggages are with her, and she has to carry, and she is the real stakeholder in sustaining the economy. So the country cannot afford to ignore the woman from budgeting. that budget must be responsive. It has to take care of the participation of the women in the economics. It should be led by the women, economic-led women, that is women-led economic development with an idea. So there was no field. All sectoral concerns were highlighted, be it employment, health, malnutrition, every aspect of sports. There was no aspect which was left. There was an impact analysis of already running a scheme by the government. There was a global context, starting from the Africa to having experiences coming from the Europe and then Asia, integrating it. Overall, that's the woman doesn't need only special care. They need to participate as equal member and sometimes more than equal member of the society, because we will look at that we cannot simply ignore that we have done this and that, and you just sit silently by that. There is a gender capital, and that the country has actually exploited that gender capital. You have to build up more, you have to strengthen more, and you have to make them realize that you are a part of system, and don't say that I am more than equal. So their idea is, let there be gender responsive budgeting, let there be out. This is what I guess from Professor Vibhuti Patel, that if the country is having rule of law, if the country is having better governance, if the country is having better auditing of its scheme, impact analysis of its scheme, if the country is having transparency, half of the problem is solved. So what that if you are having a schemes and space, that special sectoral arrangements are not being made for half of the population of the country and the world, it means the development is nothing neutral. It has something to raise a question. It has to answer many questions at our end. With this, I will ask. I will, on my behalf, I will say thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel, for joining us and making this discussion very, very interesting with exhaustive details. And students, the participants, the many stakeholders has to learn a lot further from you and from many of resource persons like you. I will request our colleague, Mr. Nageshwar Rao, to pay out of thanks that to you and the participant. Thank Mr. Nageshwar Rao.
Thank you, sir. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. So, on behalf of the Center for the Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, MANU, and Department of Political Science, I would like to thank our guest and speaker of the day, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Madam. Thank you so much, Madam, for very interesting and thought-provoking and elaborative and an enriching lecture on gender responsive budgeting. I thank profusely to the teaching and non-teaching faculty members of RCCP and the Department of Political Science, especially Director Professor Afroz Alam Sahab and Dr. Sheikh Abdul Taha and Dr. Mohsina Anjuman Sari. Last but not least, I profusely thank students, participants from the university, especially professors. I'm really thankful to Professor Amarullah Khan Saab and Professor Sahida Madam and other students and other faculty members, as well as other participants from the other universities. So thank you so much once again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Breaking the norms, I will just, because there is one concluding remarks from Amir Bhai, because I can see him, I can't. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So
Hello, sir.
Amir Bhai's spice is not added to the
No, very important. Very important.
Amir Bhai not audible.
You are not audible, sir. Yeah. You are not audible.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Now we can.
Now you can hear me? Yeah. Afroz, thank you so much for letting me know about this series of sessions. I quite enjoyed the yesterday's with Saghir, And Professor Vibhuti Patel is a big favorite of mine. She knows that. I read her, I have heard her, and today she was speaking on something that is a very, very